tell me who rock, who sell out in the stores. You tell me who flop, who cop the blue drop, who jewels got blocks, who's mostly Dolce down to the blue drop. The same old pimp, Mace, you know ain't nothing changed but my limp. Can't stop till I see my name on the blimp. Guarantee a million sales, pull a level up. You don't believe in Harlem World, nigga, double up. We don't play around, it's a bet, lay it down. Niggas didn't know me 91, bet they know me now. I'm the young Harlem nigga with the Goldie sound. Can't no PD, niggas hold me down.
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcoming to you all. It is time for the Money Time podcast. Today's episode is episode number 3 in season 2. My name is Zweli and I am not alone. I am with my co-host here, Mrs. Nikki House. Before I get her to greet the viewers at home, today's topic is a very interesting one. We all say we have boundaries in our lives. There's certain things that we do not allow. Today we're looking at financial boundaries as a topic, and we're going to be very surprised that not a lot of us knows how to manage that. When it comes to finances, I think boundaries may be looked at as a different thing compared to what we all understand as boundaries. Nikki, before I take your platform, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Zweli. Good evening, viewers. I hope everyone's well and preparing for the colder months, which seem to be knocking on our doors.
Definitely, we are preparing. You know, the Money Time podcast will always teach you to plan ahead. We're not saying go out there and go out of budget and start buying unnecessary things, you know. But yeah, just be prepared for the upcoming season because we encourage planning here. So Nikki, tonight's topic, it's a very interesting one. Financial boundaries, like I just said earlier, not everyone would understand this specifically, I think, or even if we do understand it, but we are not able to manage it as we are able to manage other boundaries. When it comes to boundaries, you know, so I would start off by asking, what are financial boundaries?
So I'll give a very simple response to this, really. Financial boundaries are rules, limits, or barriers that we put in place in relation to our money and financial interactions.
Rules, barriers, okay,
Or limits.
Or limits.
Yeah.
It seems like it's. Is there a difference between, or are there different types of boundaries that are in existence? Because you know, when you say rules, limits, and also you just mentioned
Barriers.
barriers. Does it make it? Are there any different types, or is just the same?
Sure. So today's topic is specifically around financial boundaries. So based on the work that I do and my experience with working with clients, there's two boundaries can be classified. Financial boundaries specifically can be classified into two categories. So one would be in relation to personal boundaries and the other would be in relation to business boundaries. So I'm going to briefly take you through both. Let me just quickly get my notes. Okay. So when it comes to personal boundaries, I always say first start off with self. Before you start looking at imposing boundaries with other people, put up boundaries for yourself. So what do I mean by that? You've alluded to this earlier on around planning. Planning also speaks to budgeting, right? So what are the boundaries that you put up for yourself in relation to budgeting and managing your money? What is it that is your priorities in terms of expenses? What do you do with your surplus income? These are all boundaries that you put up for yourself. So you know, as soon as you get paid. It's month end here in South Africa. A lot of people would have gotten paid over the last few days or will be paid within the next few days. When you receive your salary, what are the boundaries that you have put in place around budgeting and managing your money? Do you take all your salary and go out with your friends for a night out on the town, partying, eating out, drinking? Or do you ensure that all your priorities are taken care of in terms of your expenses, such as car payments, payments for bond, rent, insurance, groceries, and then with the surplus, you go out and have a night out on the town with your friends, with whatever's left over. Still linked to those personal boundaries with self would be things like saving and investing, right? I always say specifically to business owners, they pay everyone else except themselves. But this is also applicable to individual capacity. I see I hit a nerve there, Zweli. We'll come back to you. Is to say, have boundaries in place where you put a portion away towards your emergency savings, your long-term investments, your retirement planning. These are boundaries that you can only put in place, right? A financial planner can say to you, you need to consider this, but whether you put this in place or not is left up to you, because at the end of the day, you're the one who earns a salary and will implement it. Also linked to that would then be a different angle, which is now, or Zweli, do you want to come in before I move on?
No, you can just finish off.
Okay. The other angle is, now that you've looked at self and you've put in your own personal financial boundaries in terms of your budgeting, your savings and investments, the other aspect to financial boundaries is your financial interactions with others. And this is the one that most people are most familiar with. So let's take family and friends, right? And they may often knock on our doors when they're going through a tough time and say, hey, Zweli, can you hit me up with 500 rands this month? I need money for petrol. I need money for food. And then Zweli will say, okay, here you go. Here's 500 rands. You may find that this may not be a once-off occurrence. This may become more frequent, and the person will be knocking on your door more frequently, be it a few times a month, be it several times in a year. And then where is that financial boundary? You may reach a stage where you realize, yes, I've given this person a lot of money over the last few weeks, the last few months, within the last year, but they keep on coming back. Then that makes you an enabler. We don't know what the person's situation is in this example, but it's something that I'm using to say to you, in a situation like this, it's one of two things. Either you're happy to continue giving to the person, right? And in that way, they become your own personal charity that you're contributing towards. Or alternatively, after a while, you'll find that you start building up resentment against this person because they keep on coming to you. You get up at the crack of dawn to work, you come home late, you putting food on the table, you providing for your family. This person isn't necessarily a family member. Even if they are, why are you providing for them as well? And the problem comes in is when resentment builds in. Then you know you've got to start putting up a financial boundary here. Because if you continue giving and you feel no resentment whatsoever, then that means you've got no issue with financial boundaries. You're happy to give to the person. But the minute you start feeling that inkling of resentment, that already then says a financial boundary needs to come up. Also, in that same example, when you loan out money to family or friends, be clear about your agreement with them. Are you loaning this money out with an expectation for repayment? If so, what would be the duration for repayment? Are you going to be one of those types where you are mini Mashanisa and you're charging them interest on this? Be clear about the terms of agreement to further avoid any resentment or tension in the family relationship or the friendship. Another one would be discussing of finances amongst family and friends. So this works in two ways. You often have that arrogant person who would be at a gathering with friends and would be boastful about how much of money they have or how much of money they made this month. And in doing so, they publicizing what their financial situation is. Now, my question there is, do you have a boundary or not? Is it really necessary for you to tell people how much of money you make, or what is your reason for sharing this information, especially if people have not asked you, Zweli, what do you earn each month? Then you have the opposite, is where, and this happens to most people, they don't see the need to discuss their finances amongst people. And this could be a bad thing, especially if it's a family situation and family members like your parents need financial assistance. But if they don't know how much or how little you earn, how is it that you set, how do you set a level in terms of what is it they can ask of you? So that's a different aspect of looking at it, because if you only earning 10,000 rands per month and your parents expect you to give them 20,000 rands per month, how are you going to give that to them unless you don't communicate openly about your financial situation? Now, another aspect that I'd like to bring to the mix, and I know I'm taking you all over the show, is one where, yes, I kicked off speaking about your boundaries with yourself, and then the boundaries you put in place when you loan out money to others. But what about a situation where you fall upon tough times and you need to approach someone for money? What happens in that situation? What sort of boundaries are applicable there? And for that, I say the boundary here is, are you willing to ask? Because you find a lot of people may find themselves in a fix. They could have gotten retrenched. It's a year later. They still haven't found work. They have a sibling or a parent who is financially successful or financially stable, and that person has in the past offered financial assistance, but you find that because of pride or whatever reason, you don't take that, right? How do you get comfortable within yourself to actually ask for help? What boundaries do you put in place? What limits do you put in place to say at what stage will you ask for help? Will you only ask for help when you're out on the street and your house has been repossessed because you can't pay your bond? Or at what stage will you feel comfortable reaching out for help? So I know I've gone all over the place where Zweli. I know it's a lot that I've mentioned, but in saying all of this, I hope I've given the viewers some different types of examples of looking at financial boundaries from different aspects.
Definitely, Nikki. I think the viewers have got a pretty much a good idea of what types of boundaries are in existence. But just to share my thoughts on what you've just given, though I'm not gonna go sequential as you did, I'll probably just also be all over in terms of touching the points that you've mentioned. I think the last one, where you explaining what happens now if you have set your boundaries and now you are in need of help. I think it's a very tricky one if you do not also anticipate that things may not go as you wish for them to go in the future. Like, I think it's something that everyone needs to put as a possibility, that not that that anything can go wrong. It's possible that something may go wrong financially within my journey in life, and I may need to ask. Now, the question that automatically comes to that particular person is that when others are asking, because I know that you've spoken about rules and boundaries that one sets for themselves. But if you do not have any room for requests and being able to clearly communicate, I think you've put it out very clear that there is a situation where a person would come to me and borrow or ask for help. And if I do give them help, my expectation should be communicated if it's a loan or if I'm borrowing, if I'm giving it to you and saying to you, don't worry about it. But also be clear that as much as I'm giving you this 10,000 rands, I do not expect you to come back again in the next maybe two years. Be clear, if that's how you feel, with this 10,000, I'm not expecting you to come back. Maybe this 10,000 should be enabling you to buy stock or do something for yourself in order to be able to sustain yourself. So if we try and be clear about helping others and being clear that what are we expecting from it, because sometimes it's not that you really want your money back, but you expecting that person to take this money and do something in order for them not to find themselves in that situation again, and
uplift themselves.
Yes. Now, when it comes to you, the person now who's in trouble, and you've been enabling, like you said, you are an enabler. You've been enabling others maybe to get out of these bad situations. I think it's going to be easy for you to understand that somebody else was able to come to me, and it's not a repayment, but they were able to come to me and talk to me about their problems. I guess also, even if it's not the same person that I've helped, but I can go to somebody else and talk and see if I can get help. Because you are right. What is the use of you being a millionaire today and next year you are out in the street and you've been helping people, but just because of the boundaries that you've set, that I will never ask for help from anyone, that makes you a god, because it means that you will never have problems. Now, when you are in trouble, it means you must get yourself out of trouble. And sometimes it doesn't work like that. Life is very tricky. And Nikki, it can be a real situation which you have no control over. For example, because a person would ask, what would go wrong when I have millions? You get dropped to a situation where it would be like you are careless. Maybe people go into your account and they scam you, but you had nothing to do with those. It's not like you are careless with your money, but something like that can happen where you find yourself down and out and everything just goes wrong because of that situation. You start trying to do other things and they just make your life a mess, and you end up out in the streets and people are like, oh, what happened? And they do not know. They think you probably were careless with your money, but something bad happened. So you always need to be aware that you may need somebody else's help. It's not that you are making them to repay you, or you want life to repay you back. But when you make boundaries, be aware of such things, that such things may happen. But I think the biggest thing that I take out of it is being able to ask for help when there is a need for you to ask for help. Because I know that there's a lot of people with pride, and it's understandable. It's understandable to say, you know, I always try and teach people to manage their finances and not be careless and all that. But when you have not been careless, then what? So you need to always try and make room for such that one day I may need help, and let it be something that you take as part of life. Because if you think that you never need help from anyone, then that makes you a person who's got superpowers, that will always be the hero. And we know what happens with that type of money. Is it money character?
Archetype.
Archetype, sorry. Where you always being a hero, and sometimes when it goes wrong, there might not be anyone there. All right. So let's move on to
Zweli, just one last thing, sorry, before we move on. I realized I got so carried away with my response. I only touched on the personal financial boundaries, but I didn't touch on the business financial boundaries. So I'll just quickly touch on this before we move on to our next question, if you don't mind. Now, the second part of the boundary category is the business financial boundaries. A quick example of this would be you are now in a job, you've applied for a new position, you've interviewed, and it now comes to salary negotiation time. Obviously, from an employer's perspective, they want to get the best deal possible. They want to get the labor in relation. They want to pay you a salary, but if they can pay you less, that means they've got more money to pay for expenses or other operational costs of the business. And this is where financial boundaries become very important. I've seen a lot of clients where they don't negotiate according to their value. For whatever reasons, whatever offers on the table, they accept it. And a few months down the line, they realize that once taxes and deductions are taken, they sometimes sit with a lower net income than what they did in their previous role. But it's because they don't ask the relevant questions, and most importantly, they do not value themselves enough to ask for their work. So be wary of that. Another area where I've seen lack of financial boundaries is when it comes to hours people put in their job. Now, if you're a contractor, you generally submit timesheets. The more hours you work, the more billable hours you're going to get paid on, right? But when it comes to an employee who gets a set salary each month, it's not uncommon to see employees putting extra hours on a daily, weekly, monthly basis because of the carrot that's dangled in front of them in the form of an annual performance bonus or in the form of a quarterly bonus. I've seen many people, and I myself can attest to this, having worked in a corporate many years ago. I did the very same thing. I worked myself day in, day out, suffered from fatigue and burnout because I was trying to chase an elusive so-called bonus, which came, but it was never commensurate to the amount of time and effort that I put in. So here, this is something that may resonate with a lot of listeners and viewers out there. Be wary of this. Put boundaries in place with regards to this. If not, you're going to find yourself in pursuit of finance and getting a bonus or negotiating a higher salary. You may put yourself in a situation that you may regret in a few years' time. And let's not forget, I always say, your health is your greatest wealth.
True, Nikki, very true. There, I think also you are more emphasizing on the time that people put into their work. And if people remember, we've taught this, and I think generally they would know that time is your money. So When you put more hours, you expect more money. Eh, and you are right that if that is not done properly, you may end up with some form of regret taking a decision to be hired by that particular company. And I think also now when you talk about this, it comes back to also people who are self-employed and entrepreneurs. You also find the same situation where you are overworked. The demands of the clients, they just going up now. And it's because of in IT, we've got what we call specific specs, where the requirements or specifications, where you say, I want maybe a system that does A, B, C, D. And when I'm starting to deliver that system, you now have good ideas and you're thinking, no, man, we can actually make this better, but your budget hasn't changed. And that could now be really, really going, tempting me now to overcompensate on my boundaries, like find myself compromising on the boundaries if I do not communicate that, okay, now what you want is beyond the scope. I need to charge you more, because it's not about me not wanting to do more, because since you want more, it means more money. And it also happened with younger people who are passionate about their skills. They may work. When you are young, you are not more interested in the income. You are driven by what you can produce and all that. And it can be a problem because you do not learn anything there in terms of communicating that anything that I do beyond what I'm expected to do should be I should maybe consider charging more overtime, things like that. It should be something that people also think about and consider. But yeah, thank
That's
you.
an excellent example, Zweli, of putting boundaries in place with that IT system example. Absolutely brilliant. And also, to your point, a lot of younger people, because they don't really have a baseline in terms of what a starting salary expectations may be, you'll find just for experience, they often find themselves subject to cheap labor just because they're passionate about what they do and they just want to try and get a foot in the door. But you have a lot of employees out there who are not fair and they take advantage of them.
Yeah, certainly they will definitely take advantage because they've studied the environment and they understand it. You always wonder why there's always a junior required, when there's no senior. And you just know that the employer is hoping that the junior that they hire is very good and can produce without really like affecting their budget. Because I believe that the more experience you have, obviously the more you have to pay. But yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Nikki. I think you've really explained. There's a lot that comes into mind, but because of time, I think we should move with our questions. The question is, if you do have boundaries, or let's say if you do not have boundaries, financial boundaries, are there any negative impact for not setting boundaries, or are there negative consequences if you do not set boundaries?
So the only negative consequences come in if you start experiencing negative emotions or if it has a negative impact on your life. So let me give you a few examples. I kicked off by speaking about the financial boundaries you impose upon yourself. Here, if you don't manage your money well, you could find yourself in a situation where you're overspending. And you have a situation where each month your expenses far exceed the income that's coming in. And that happens because you've got no clear boundaries in place around what your areas of prioritization is. And somewhere along the line, something's not adding up. Excuse the pun, right? Also linked to that would be lack of emergency savings and long-term investments. If you haven't put a boundary in place to say, no matter what, each month, even if you're putting away 50 rands, it's about the habit of saving. It's about having something as opposed to having nothing at all. A lot of people often delay it and they say, when I get my next job or if I earn a certain income, then only will I be able to put money towards savings and investments. Here's the thing, guys. If you're not doing it when you have a small income, I can assure you from a psychological perspective, you're definitely not going to get to it when you earn a higher income, because this aspect is all about the psychology of money, and it's all about getting into the habit of putting away money. And let's look at some negative consequences when it comes to family and friends. Here's where things get really interesting. The first thing is, it may cause you a great deal of stress and anxiety, and you may find yourself avoiding people because you realize this person, Zweli, whenever I see him, he wants to hit me up for money. And then you're going to try and avoid family gatherings or situations wherever you feel that Zweli may be there, because you weren't courageous enough to stand on your own 2 feet and put a barrier in place and say to Zweli, Zweli, I've given you money in the past, but this has to end now. I can no longer give you money, right? Instead of doing that, you're now avoiding Zweli because you did not communicate how you feel. And that could cause a great deal of family tension, because the family would wonder, but I mean, where's this guy? We don't see him any longer. Why is he avoiding family gatherings? What's happening here? So can you see what the effect is in that sort of scenario? And also, if you have a situation that I used the example earlier on where you don't communicate well with your family around financial expectations or what is that you can contribute financially, you may find yourself overspending. And so if your family wants 20,000 rands per month from you, you're only earning 10,000 per month, you haven't communicated to them, you may find yourself increasing your credit card, your overdraft, going to meet with machinistas, going to banks for loans, because the expectation is 20,000 and you did not know how to communicate and put a boundary in place to say, listen, all I earn is 10,000, the most I can give you is 5,000 per month. Can you see the impact of stress it would have on you around that? Then the other thing is things like dependency issues. We spoke about the terminology enabler. If a person is in trouble financially, if they know Zweli is always a person they can go to bail them out, you're now going to have a codependent, or you're going to have they're going to have a dependency issue on you. They're going to have a dependency on you in terms of rescuing them financially. And unless you put a financial barrier in place and say, enough, or these are the terms and conditions, it's going to become a recurring cycle. And if there's no resentment initially, trust me when I say that resentment is going to come. There could also be a situation where there may be a loss of trust. So I come to you, Zweli, and I borrow 5,000 from you, and you've put a financial boundary in place, and you said to me, Nikki, I need this repaid in 3 months' time. I won't charge you any interest, but at the end of June, I want 5,000 back into my bank account. And somehow you find that I'm unable to pay you. I don't communicate that to you. June goes by, July goes by, you ask for the money, I avoid you. Can you see how that causes tension and conflict in the friendship, how that brings a loss of trust? Because going forward, even if I do someday return the money to you, you are never going to trust me. And if I'm in a financial fix and I come back to you for money, you may never give me any money, even if you have, because that relationship of trust has been broken. So these are some examples. When you look at personal relationships, especially couples, I'll go back to, I think it was our previous podcast where we spoke about money and relationships. Money, guys, can cause a great deal of stress on a relationship. If you don't openly communicate with each other about financial expectations, if there's no financial agreements in place, this causes a great deal of stress and strain on the relationship. Now, post-COVID, you hear a lot of buzzwords floating around at corporates or around social circles where people keep on using terminology like well-being, mental health, and how COVID has impacted people's mental health. But what people don't speak about is how the financial strain of COVID has actually impacted people's health, because a lot of people during COVID times, exactly 4 years ago, had to move to reduce salaries. 4 years later, their salaries never increased. A lot of people were retrenched. A lot of people found themselves retrenched, setting up small businesses or getting into jobs where they didn't put financial boundaries in place. They're now earning 60% less than what they previously earned prior to COVID. All of this causes a great deal of stress on your body. It causes a great deal of emotional and mental strain. And these are things a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, because mental health issues are still very much considered to be taboo in certain cultures. Also linked to that is burnout. Because people find themselves giving, and in order to give, they've got to work harder and harder. I earlier on spoke about that carrot that's dangled in front of employees in the form of a performance bonus or an annual bonus. And you find that they work long, hard hours, and that eventually leads to fatigue and burnout, which can then lead to greater not only mental health issues, but greater physical health issues as well. So these are just a few of the negative consequences that I can think of at the top of my head.
Oh, I think you said a lot and it makes sense.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot and it all makes sense, Nikki. And if I were to touch on any, I would just go back to the how these if they are not set. I think the common one is the stress that one experiences, whether be it not being able to set business or personal financial boundaries. But I think the outcome would probably be the same in terms of the what really happens to you, like the stress that you experience because of you couldn't set boundaries. But like you said, there's something that is interesting that you're saying, that if emotionally and psychologically it does not affect you, it means you are still okay with it. And but if it continues, automatically the mind will probably look at it as an abuse, and definitely
Yes.
will trigger some resentment. So even for those viewers who are always in need of help, just be careful around that when you're asking for, because we're not talking to people who are helping only, but we're also talking to those who also pose for help, to understand what the other person is going through as you keep asking for help and not being able to honor your promises and all that. Because I think A healthy relationship would be a situation where I can come to you anytime and say, I need this. I will definitely give you in the next 3 days. And I honor that. I don't think that affects anything, though it could. I think the fact that it's healthy until it goes wrong. But if it just goes wrong, then the trust is broken. Like you
Yes.
said, we can do this exchange of money maybe for 10 years, but you can do this thing once of breaking that promise and the trust is gone. So that's how sensitive this thing is. So we need to be careful around that. So thank you, Nikki. Now, I think the question is, how can viewers at home or anyone watching or anyone that is hearing this message set boundaries? Because I don't think it's a very easy thing. You can, to practice something and to say something is two completely different things. So I can say today, I will no longer do this, but what's the best way of, setting and implementing your boundaries?
So, Zweli, you're quite right. This topic about financial boundaries is something that's highly debatable, because you may find that some people are struggling with financial boundaries, but they're not ready to accept that they have an issue. And if they're not ready to accept that it is an issue for them, then who are we to judge and say, listen, as an outsider, I can see you've got boundaries around financial issues. But for those of you on this call who realize that this is an issue or could be a potential issue in your life, the first thing I always say is mindfulness, and that's your realization. The fact that you just realize, uh-oh, I've got a problem, that in itself is success, because it's only when you're mindful enough to accept you have a problem, then you can seek help. The next thing linked to that is self-reflection, because you're going to find financial boundaries and lack thereof isn't something that just pops up, right? Most of the people on this call are 20s, 30s, 40s, much older. So it's something that has come up in various ages or stages of your life. And you've got to spend some time reflecting, because it becomes a pattern. And you've got to also look and see, where is the pattern more prevalent? Is your financial, or are your financial abusers your family or your friends or your spouse or your kids? That's very important to know, because then you'll be able to then see how you put in your financial boundaries. For example, with parents, and this is a very common one, so that's why I'm using this example. And Zweli, you can take some notes for your little one and the future as well. It's not uncommon for parents to find that their biggest financial abusers are actually their kids. Yes, it is your duty when you bring kids into this world to financially provide for them until the ages of at least 21 or sometimes older. But kids out there are very sneaky and manipulative. And you find that they often financially abuse their parents. And because their parents have no financial boundaries in place, they just give, give, give. And you find, as a parent, you question yourself and wonder, why is it that you're resenting that you're spending more money on your kids and there's nothing left for you at the end of the day? And then you start questioning, are you a bad parent? Should you be feeling this way? And it's not abnormal to feel this way. It just means that you haven't put strong financial boundaries in place with your kids. Because remember, if your child is 7 or 8 years old, there's no boundaries and you keep on giving. As a child grows older, what happens is their ask becomes more and more expensive. And then at that point in time, when a child's now 13 or 14 years old, it becomes very difficult for you as a parent to start saying no and pushing back and putting a financial boundary in place, because the child is going to become rebellious and wonder, but what happened? I've always asked and I've always received. And now my parent is saying no. What is happening here? Right? So this was just an example that I've used, but basically it's about self-reflection. Go back, analyze all different relationships and areas, and you'll pick up a common trend around where you've got weak financial boundaries in place. A very big one, and I say this all the time, it's like my mantra: communication, communication. Whether it's to spouse, whether it's to kids, whether it's to friends, whether it's to siblings, whether it's to parents, communicate, communicate, communicate. There should not be any emotion such as pride when you communicate about exactly how you feel. And you can't make assumptions that people would know how you feel if you don't tell them. So communication is very, very key. By communicating, even asking, Mom, Dad, you are now retired. What are your financial expectations of me? You may often find your parents may say, we're happy with our own pension fund. We have no expectations. Whereas you as a child may think, my parents have retired now. I need to give them some money each month. But why are you making that assumption without sitting down with them and having a conversation? Can you see where I'm getting at here?
Definitely.
And then the last aspect I'd say around setting financial boundaries is consistency. You can't today, when Zweli comes to ask for $100, give it to him, but Zweli's wife comes to you the same day and asks for $100, but you say no to her. So what's the difference between Zweli and Zweli's wife? Why are you inconsistent, right? Or is it because you only had 100 rands that you could only give to one person? So it's about consistency, but maybe a better example is if you've put a financial boundary in place and you've said, if anyone asks me for money, the most I can give to them this month is 500 rands. And you find that Zweli comes in, you give Zweli the 500 rands. A few days later, Zweli's wife comes in and she wants 500 rands. And you use your credit card and you take 500 rands to give to her. Where's there consistency in the boundaries you've put for yourself, right? So whatever you decide, there must be consistency. And check yourself. You can be dishonest to everyone else, but if you're dishonest to yourself, for me, that is the greatest dishonesty.
Yeah.
So these are just a few examples. It is not easy, especially when you get into the habit of always giving and not saying no, to now get into a space where you're saying, no, but I can only give so much, or outright no. It becomes very difficult, and it may cause a lot of tension and stress and strain in relationships. I may have mentioned this before in previous podcasts, but it takes a minimum of 21 to 66 days for a habit to change. So don't expect to start implementing this after the podcast and expect miracles. This is work in progress. And trust me when I say God or the universe will test you. Those tests will certainly come. Be strong, and whatever you decide, whatever your conviction is, stand by it.
Thank you, Nikki. You've really explained it very well. And I think, when you said something about acceptance, the first thing that one maybe has to do is to realize that I have a problem, and is that on its own, it's a successful story. We are so ashamed to even admit to ourselves, because you are not even asked to go publicly out and say, you know what, I have a problem, I cannot set boundaries. You are just accepting with your mind and soul and your heart to say, you know what, I'm a victim of this, or I have a problem. And how do you know? Because whatever that is being said, you can relate to it, especially the effects of not having boundaries. Are you stressed at the end of the month? Are you avoiding people? Are you avoiding calls? Or are you always having anxiety whenever you have a call from somebody that you know and you're thinking it might be, all those things? And if yes, how has it affected you? Because, like, for example, you are saying, if it hasn't affected you, chances are it will keep on repeating until something goes wrong. So I really think that that's where I want to stop and say, out of everything, I would also want to emphasize that realization, I think it's a big step, and not to be ashamed to admit, especially to yourself,
For
that
sure.
I have a challenge that I need to overcome. But also there's something you said that for me, also, I know that it's real. You can never have these habits like done and dusted in 2-3 days. It's a challenge for life, to be honest with you.
Work in progress,
Yes.
ongoing.
Yes, you'll always experience, like you said, you can easily be inconsistent, Nick, easily, because you meet somebody and you've known others for the longest of time, but there's this particular person that you just connect with and you gel with, you work well, and you, for some reason, you end up compromising your boundaries, and you don't know how. And then when everything goes back to normal, we realize you've just helped somebody that really needed help. So sometimes it won't be easy, because I can set my boundaries and say, I can never go beyond this amount to borrow somebody. And that person comes through and says, I need this to do APC, but I'll sort you out immediately after so many days. And you do that, you realize I've just helped somebody, and I had to compromise my boundaries. So it won't be a perfect journey all the time.
Not at all.
We also want people to think like that to say, don't regret if you did the right thing and the outcomes, you can see them. Because sometimes we are too stiff with obviously our rules and boundaries, and we end up losing the fact that we're all humans,
Yes.
and things can really go wrong in somebody else's life, and it can also be the same for you. But thank you so much, Nikki, for that. And I also like the fact that you did mention that God will test you.
Oh, for sure. Trust me, when these type of things are all about an inner personal journey of personal growth. And when you embark on this, the lessons will come fast and furiously, and you will be often tested. And viewers, listeners, you're welcome to drop us a line to let us know of your experience. It would be wonderful to hear about your experiences.
Yeah, true, very true. I think maybe we need to in our fifth podcast, we need to just make it the viewers podcast, where we just try and find, especially based on our 4 episodes that we would have done, anything feedback for those people who've watched the Money Time podcast. You can send us an audio, a video clip, just to give us feedback on your thoughts, so it wouldn't be a podcast where me and Nikki sit and talk, but we'll be listening to the viewers, especially around the 4 episodes that we would have done by then. It would be nice just to hear and listen to what other people are thinking based on the topics that we've provided.
I think that will be a great idea, Zweli.
Thank you. Nikki, we are rushing for time now. Are you able to share with us your personal boundaries that you set for yourself in
Really,
life?
why do you do this to me? On a national platform, you want me to air my dirty laundry, and you always leave me so vulnerable. Okay, so financial boundaries is something that I have struggled with for the longest time in my life. And I'm not going to give any reasons and explanations and justify and give you long winded stories. But what I can share, and we have discussed this in different podcasts, is that when you do money coaching, we do a money quiz, which links to your money archetypes. And one of my dominant archetypes is the martyr archetype. So the martyr archetype, and I know that's your archetype as well, Zweli, is someone who always rushes in and they rescue people in need. And this is not only financially, but in other ways. So once I became aware of my archetype, that was when I started putting in financial boundaries. So today's podcast is very close to my heart because it is something that I can closely identify with. And for me, it is my daily struggle to ensure that I'm not only being true to the financial barriers that I put up for self, but also those in terms of my interactions with family, friends, clients, etc. So yes, in a nutshell, I've had many instances where I've had very weak boundaries and I've really been taken for a ride. I've lost a lot of money in the past because of poor boundaries. I've learned from those lessons and it continues to be work in progress for me.
I know that you want to talk
Yes.
passionate.
So then you know how it works, really. You ask me, I ask the same question. Can you share around financial boundaries in your life?
I think I started understanding financial boundaries 2 years back when I met you, Nick. It was you were straight and during our sessions to say, really, your problem here is boundaries. And yes, I still struggle with that, Nikki. And I have though learned a lot and understood mostly that you need to start. One of the biggest lessons around these boundaries was that never uh, allow yourself not to benefit from the work that you do. Sometimes I remember you've put it blunt in more than one session to say, I don't want to see a situation where you earn income and never do something for yourself. And it doesn't look like it's a bound, but if you do say, look at it, it's setting a rule to say, I am never going to work for like a month or for a particular period and earn money and not be able to just thank myself, even if it's buy myself a chocolate and
Yes.
that has helped because it has allowed me to start understanding the benefit of setting rules. Because sometimes you do not understand the benefit because you're not implementing any rule. But me understanding that rule, that to say you need to do something for yourself after having worked on for such a long time, and it has allowed me to be able to uh, what do you call it?
Honor yourself.
Yes. So thank you, Nikki, for that. And I still struggle with boundaries, but like we are saying, it's work in progress, and we believe that we are going to one day be able to, be consistent and still not be a harmful person to others, because you can easily be like that if you do not understand exactly what it means. It doesn't mean be cruel. It doesn't mean be rough on people. Just, try and manage things properly, communicate your expectation and all that. Thank you, Nikki, for the topic. I think we are now at the end of our show, and thank you very much. It was a very interesting one. It links a lot with the previous podcast. By the way, catch the other podcast if you haven't seen our season 2. We've got Finding Your Life Purpose, and we also have Money and Relationships. This is our third one. Nikki, your last words for the viewers at home. From my side, it's a goodbye. What I can say is that once you start finding, and once you accept that you need help, I think it's a good start to be able to set up your boundaries, and reasonably so. Do not rush. Do things in a right manner. Nikki?
So from my side, just maybe some food for thought for the viewers and the listeners. Something we did not touch on during the course of the podcast is the familiar concept of black tax in South Africa. And this is because of past legacy issues and where this or how this actually impacts financial boundaries. And a lot of us find ourselves in this conflict of financial boundaries because of legacy issues. And we find ourselves giving, be it to our parents, our siblings, our cousins, because of what has happened in the past. So I know I should have brought this in much earlier, and I purposefully did not, because I know that this will open up a can of worms and our podcast could go on for hours and hours. So it's me saying, we do acknowledge at the Money Time podcast that in our country, we have had legacy issues which have impacted our families from a financial perspective. And as a result, it is a reason why people from certain cultures struggle with financial boundaries. So please be gentle on yourself. Know that as much as we're giving you this guidance around financial boundaries, both Zweli and I come from situations where we were impacted by legacy issues, and we've been honest to say we struggle with financial boundaries, but it is partly because of the legacy issues. So do keep that in mind when trying to set up boundaries, and just when having a discussion with yourself or other people around this particular concept. Zweli, once again, thanks for an amazing, insightful podcast. To the viewers and listeners, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I look forward to engaging with you during the next podcast. Bye for now.
Bye.
Who Jews got back? Who's mostly Dolce down to the blue top? The same old pimp, Mace, you know ain't nothing changed but my limp. Can't stop till I see my name on the blimp. Guarantee me and sales pull a level up. You don't believe in Harlem World, nigga, double up. We don't play around, it's a bet, lay it down. Niggas didn't know me 91, bet they know me now. I'm the young Harlem nigga with the Goldie sound. Can't no PD, niggas hold me down. Cooler, school me to the game, now I know my duty. Stay humble, stay low, blow like Hootie. True pimp, niggas spin no dough on the booty. When you yell, there go Mace, there go your cutie. He have just won the Bad Boy Golf Tournament. How do you feel about winning this PGA?
Man, well, I was having some trouble on the 17th hole, but my man B.I. from up above came down, talked to me, told me to cool out. I did it. I did it for B.I.